Hi everyone, you're on to the Agribusiness chat with Jinmi Ajayi once again, and today we are going to be having a very important conversation around agribusiness financing. That is actually one of the most important aspect or areas of agribusiness. And today we have this Tosin Ojo of Sahel Capital that's going to be helping us shed, more light on the issues. Surrounding agribusiness financing and how to go about raising funds for our agribusiness venture. Thank you very much. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you very much, Jimmy. Okay, my name is Tosin Ojo. I work at Sahel Capital, VP in the investment team. And basically, Sahel Capital has about 10-year history in Nigeria at the forefront of agriculture, advisory, and private financing, providing private capital, basically. So the firm manages right now about $95 million fund that invests in a number of agribusinesses across Nigeria and other African countries. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So let's go straight to the discussion. So how easy is it for people, Nigerians, to raise capital, to raise funds, or even for their startups or their agribusiness ventures? And then also for those who need to scale, what are the necessary steps for them to take? And then, what are the loopholes to look out for?
Yeah, I think one of the things to take note of or to start from is thinking about when people are starting out in agribusinesses and the sort of funding that is available to them. Agribusiness is kind of peculiar and different from like some other sectors that has lesser operational intensity. The agri sector has very huge operational intensity, and therefore the kind of financing that are available to companies starting the agribusiness space, or the kind of investors that are interested in that space are not the same as you have for other types of startups and maybe tech and maybe other businesses that have lesser operational intensity. So if you take tech, for example, have lesser operational intensity. So you have that a couple more, a number of interested angel investors, maybe VC funds that are more interested in that space than supporting agribusiness. So I think that's the starting point. So for anybody that is trying to go into agribusiness, whether you're thinking about integrated processing, mostly the funding available for primary agriculture is even lesser. So if you're thinking about going into agriculture, you should figure out how you integrate it with processing or something.
Exactly.
Right. So that space is a bit different in terms of who you should go and approach for funding. I think that's the first thing to note. Because of the operational intensity, it's also kind of maybe can be asset heavy. You will typically have longer lead time before you get to sort of like the effort you put in before you'll be able to raise money might be a little bit more. You might not be able to raise as a large ticket as some of, let's say, I'm comparing it to a pure tech space, for example. So that's also what you need to keep in mind. So if you are starting out, the very first thing to think about as an investor is, what do you have? How do you bootstrap? So that you get to a point where you can show some decent traction and you've eliminated some of the very early stage risk that is in every business, but more peculiar in agribusiness. And as part of that bootstrapping, you can then also seek out friends, relatives, families, all of those things. For that initial what would typically be like a pre-seed stage for like a comparable startup, right? As you start showing traction, so you start having revenues, for example, you are tweaking your business model, you're figuring out what works, what doesn't work. You then need to decide about, okay, can this business even scale? The other big problem that agribusinesses have is scalability, because the ease of scalability in agribusiness and say tech It's not the same. Like I said, it's operationally intense. There's a lot of assets that is involved most times to scaling. And that means that, there's a lot more capital that is required. So as you're trying to scale, you need to think about, can I scale this business? Because if you can't scale the business, then it makes it difficult to attract investors post your own money, family, and friends. Because investors want to put money today and they want to see how that money will grow to 3 times, 4 times. And that can only come with scalability. So once you start showing some traction, start with friends, family, the second thing you then need to figure out is, before even going to raise the money, like you need to figure out the scalability of that business. Does that mean that you would maybe focus more on one aspect of the value chain than the other that is easier to scale? So I give an example. If you are like in integrated processing, for you to be able to scale, let's say you have a farm and you also have a processing plant. For you to be able to scale, does that mean you might have to focus more or only on the processing plant and not the farm? Because if you're trying to do both at the same time, it requires more capital, it's difficult to scale. Investors are not convinced. Is that what you're going to do? Would you find a partner or collaborator? So for example, if you are even doing processing and you're doing B2B processing, for example, and you're selling to companies, are you going to figure out how you now start doing products that are for mass?
Okay, continue.
So I was giving the example that, for example, if you're thinking about scaling, if you have a farm and you have processing plants, you might not be able to scale both if you are going to go to a certain scale. So you're thinking, should I just leave this farm, collaborate with other farms, focus on processing plants so that I can scale fast? Another example I was giving is that you're thinking about your product and you might be thinking, this product I'm doing B2B. Should I go B2C because there's a mass market? I can do a mass market product, for example, that has a larger addressable market, and I can sell it to larger mass market. And then you figure out your distribution, you figure out all of those things, your sales and marketing strategy and everything, right? But you need to really think about how do you scale, because one of the big problems with agribusiness is that many are small and many have stayed small, and it's difficult to attract funding for your next stage when it's not clear to an investor the size, like how big it can be, because people want to put in money and they want to make 2 times, that money, right? So once you pass that, you have an hypothesis, it's tested, you have customers, you have a market, you figure out what works, what doesn't work by bootstrapping and from family and friends funds. The second thing you really need to figure out is that, is this the business model that will make me scale, or what do I need to tweak in this business model to scale? After you figure that out, then you can then scouting for funding from institutional investors. It can be banks, it can be like funds that are suited to that sector. There are all these cheap debt from government institutions. There's private investors that you can approach. There's private equity firms like us, like others on the African continent.
Yeah.
Like us, like others on the African continent that try to focus on food and ag.
Yeah.
So I think generally that's what my take is on that.
Okay. So I like how you highlighted your organization. So for some of the funding that the likes of your organizations give to people to invest, to business, entrepreneurs actually, does it also go with some kind of mentorship, other than the fact that you want to invest with a profitable organization just to get your funding, but do these firms also offer guidance, mentorship to these entrepreneurs?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I won't call it mentorship, but I'll call it more like a lot of, and there's some hand holding and working with you and supporting you. So it's not like a bank debt or bank funding that you just go, you fill paperwork, they give you money, and whatever you do with the money is your headache, right? And just they have collateral you pay back. From the very beginning, before we even sort of like say this is amount you can invest in your business. We sit with you first to understand you. So there's some relationship building, because it's also you're trying to understand the entrepreneur, right? From there, it's be clear what are the strengths, or what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and what are the gaps in your business, right? And so if we think that the business is interesting enough, maybe the prospects, maybe what you've done, maybe the market potential is interesting enough, and then we say, we can provide funding. And by the way, we manage two funds, Fund for Agricultural Finance in Africa, in Nigeria, rather, FAFIN, and Social Enterprise Fund for Agriculture in Africa, SEFA. Now, so FAFIN is almost fully invested. So it's SEFA that is our newer fund. Now, when we now figure that out, we then decide, so this is, you can come and say you need $2 million, or $1 million, or $500K, or $30K. So you can look at your business and say, okay, this business needs more or needs less. So that process, there's some help, that is provided in helping you do in supporting your forecasting, business planning, depending on the kind of funding we're providing, whether it's equity or equity-like instrument, or pure play debt. So there's all that support that.
Okay. All right.
So I was actually at the point where I was saying, so all that process of working with you to do your business planning, to do your projections, to discuss valuation with you, with equity, and even if it's not equity, it's debt, to look at the cash flows, because unlike banks, most of the debts that we structure are structured in a way that they have to be paid back from the cash flows of the company.
Okay.
All that process, there's some lending, there's some hand holding that is there. And if we do invest, then the relationship now becomes even more formal. So we have people on our team that can provide some support, maybe in terms of your strategy, help you look at it, tune it, depending if it's equity, we sometimes even support you in hiring new people depending on where they are needed, and work with you along that journey. So I won't call it mentoring. It's more like it's only done for if there's sufficient interest, and it's from the pre-investment process. Like there'll be some learnings, and if we do go ahead and invest, of course, there's not a bigger, more elaborate type relationship that and expertise and knowledge that we bring and help your business and the company.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So, since you've been in business, you've been in this sector for quite some time, could you highlight some success stories, especially from those who started from nothing, just a brilliant idea, and right now they are employers of labor. They are probably even gone beyond processing. They're even exporting. Could you highlight some success stories, please?
I think that I'll mention maybe one or two that I've seen. One that is our own portfolio company, and one that is a company that I know of that I've spoken to, and I might not be at liberty to mention the company's name, but
no problem at all.
I'll speak to it. But I think one thing to just mention before, talking about them, as success stories, is to mention that, the road to success is really paved with a lot of hard work. And in the ag sector, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of grunt work, to get to that point, right? When people can see you as a success story. It's not fast paced like some other sectors where you can deploy quickly, where, it's just different. So the companies I'm going to mention, so there was a company we at Sahel that was the first company we invested in. It's in Kano, northern Nigeria, L&Z yogurt. And they have, when we invested, it was an integrated dairy company. So they use fresh milk, and also they partly use fresh milk to produce yogurt, right? When we invested, it was a small business, family owned, not very structured. revenues were probably around 200 million, and we invested in 2015. As I speak to you, revenues have gone up by about 6 times.
Okay.
So their revenues are now around 1 point something billion, roughly up to 1.2. And their profitability, EBITDA, has also gone up by about 5-6 times, right? Those are the headlines. When we invested, they were just in a couple of, their products was just in a couple of places in the north. Now you go to ShopRite in Lagos, you find their products. They are in Lagos, they are in the east. Part of the support we brought also was to help build the whole sales and marketing strategy penetration. But that happened over, like I said, it was our first investment in 2015. So you can imagine that has happened over, what now, 6 years, right?
6 years, yeah.
Exactly. So literally in this sector, there's no overnight. There's no overnight,
overnight success. Yeah. There's no, it don't blow.
No, it's a sector where you have to put in the hard work. There's a lot of hard work in agribusiness. And if you're not cut out for that, maybe you just find another sector where things are easier, right? But in this sector, there's just no way, there's the other company that I know of that I'm going to mention, they produce what we call kokoro, processed corn sticks, and was a company. The founder was like employed in corporate sector, went for his MBA, came back, and just from speaking with friends, he used to buy this normal unbranded kokoro, that we all know. Yeah. People kind of just liked it, and from speaking to them, he then were like, you know what, I can do this, and that was how he started, right? And right now, the business is still growing, it's still ramping up. Yeah. At least there's the last time we spoke, I think the kokoro is now sold in about 25 states in Nigeria. Yes, so one of the things that is really difficult to figure out when you're doing processing in agribusiness is distribution, because the big companies have distribution assets, they have distribution on lockdown. And for smaller SME companies, even when you can produce great products, you can't get it in front of who will buy. You can't, as big, as wide as Nigeria is, as informal as our distribution channels are, if you can't get them across, then it's really difficult. Over 90% of trade in Nigeria happen through informal channels. Outside kiosks, open markets, not the likes of ShopRite and Co. Not big stores, right? So one of the things he's been able to figure out, is how to get to remote, unknown. So you might not find it on the highland around like that. I mean, I've seen the products in for example in Presembano before, but you might not find it there every time. But people who have cracked it, they figure out where the mass market is and who are like the key retailers or the key wholesalers in those markets, in those areas where the products are moving, right? And where the products are selling, right? And to be able to do that is just a lot of hard work. And you know that in this sector, for example, last 1 year, food raw material prices have almost gone out of the roof. I've forced a lot of smaller players out of the sector, right? There's another one I think I should mention. It's an integrated poultry company that we invested in, that we are still invested in. And so we invested, and the company just went into challenges, and we're able to restructure the management. And from investing and a revenue, when we invested in 2016 and a revenue of about 500 million, the company went down to a revenue of about 300 million just immediately after we invested. But from that 300 million revenue, or 200 and something actually, from that, now the company is doing about 1.6 billion in revenue. Because between that is 2017 and now, and doing and profitable. And their EBITDA profitability has also grown by like 3 times or so. And that is despite the poultry sector is one that has done well, and that is despite all the, increase in raw material prices and everything. So there are a couple of these things that I've said is just add headlines. If I were to go into details of the work that went
I understand. Yeah.
to put these companies to where they are today,
Yeah.
And I think the point is just to really underscore the fact that there are no overnight successes in the agribusiness space.
Definitely.
You are figuring out many things. You're figuring out your supply chain, raw material. Should you do it yourself? Should you partner? Should you get it from somebody? With that, there's a lot of volatility in commodity prices, depending on what your raw material is. You're figuring out processing, right? Getting the right machines, the right people, the right products, blah, blah, blah. You're figuring out distribution and marketing, sales. You're figuring, and in a country where a lot of these things are informal, they are fragmented. You're figuring out regulation. When now that will hold you want to register a product 1 year, you're still on it. You can't sell because you're not registered. You're trying, it's a lot of headache in being in that space. But I think the beauty of it is that, personally, if I think about it, I think that it's one of the sectors that just touches on everything and everyone. And I would say that's just the most impactful, right? Because that's like the basics for everyone to even start living, I think just be able to be a part of that in some way, shape, or form is fulfilling. I think the other bit is also the ability to generate employment, right? Some at semi-skilled, unskilled, and just give hope, to people and all of that. And I think those two things just makes it fulfilling. Of course, we all do it for the financial reward, and if you do it well, there will be returns. Right?
Definitely, yeah. Right. All right. So there's increasing interest in Africa due to the available agricultural land, and with the global population set to hit over 20% by 2050. And what efforts are in place to ensure the indigenous technical and capacity development?
I think at the end of the day, the world has become flat and is becoming more flat, right? Global. Prior to COVID, supply chains had become totally global, and it's the same for food supply chains. So, for example, while Africa still has most of the more arable land, as a matter of fact, the reason why agriculture has grown year on year in Africa is not because our yields have improved substantially. At least I can speak for Nigeria. It's not because we are doing game-changing research that improve yields, that improve all of those things. It's more because we are increasing acreage under cultivation. Like we've been increasing acreage under cultivation year by year because mostly subsistence farming that we do, and 60% of Africans are employed in agriculture, mostly subsistence, so we increase acreage every year. Now, there are two things to take note of. Even that for Africans has become challenged with climate change, because if you look at what has been happening in Nigeria with herdsmen and with pastoralists and farmer crisis, is mainly a pressure for resources, because climate change has led to a lot of droughts at the very up north, and grazing land are sort of like constricted or reduced, and people are moving further south for grazing land, right? So in two ways, one of the things we need to do, even domestically, is that we need to pay attention to the changes that are already reducing availability of croppable land. And that has little to even do with, other interests from other parts of the world. This is mainly driven by climate change, like I've said, droughts, excess flooding, and things like that. And unfortunately, Africa is one of where we sit in the world. We're going to be one of the most impacted. We're already seeing it. Yeah. Right. So that's the first thing, is to pay attention, and then to start using things that can help indigenous farmers. So There's something that is called climate smart agriculture.
Mm.
So how indigenous farmers can start even introducing like, climate friendly technology into the things they do. So for example, solar irrigation pumps, for example, a number of things that can be introduced, that maybe to provide infrastructure or to provide support for farming, but in a way still helps to manage the global issues or the macro issues of resource constraints. Of course, the second thing is that we need effective policies, right? This is a sector where all over the world is policy driven. We can't shy away from effective leadership, effective government policies that will be well implemented, right? If you, in Europe, agriculture, some agricultural commodities are still subsidized, right? Government comes in, they intervene. In the US, same. You can't shy away from government intervention in agriculture. But we do not just need tactical actions. We don't need like just throwing money at the sector at the problem, because money don't solve problems. These are difficult problems, multiple stakeholders we're talking about. So let's take one, constraints on farmlands. We're talking about indigenous farmers. We're talking about pastoralists. We're talking about companies that rely on those indigenous farmers for their supply chain, right? We're talking about aggregators and middlemen. We're talking about a lot of stakeholders, right? And difficult problems require really sitting down, figuring out how the interest of everyone can be better taken care of, right? And then proposing a solution that works with that, and then implementing the solution. So what we've done well as a country, sometimes we can sit down, figure out solutions, but we never implement well. Or at other times, instead of sitting down and figuring out the right solutions to these problems, we like to throw money at problems. So we go and set up a fund and say, everybody that is in this sector, come and access this fund. And that really doesn't solve the problem, right?
No.
So we really never solve these problems, even though we keep throwing more money at it. So I think that's the first thing. It's for us even domestically to pay attention to what we are seeing domestically and how it affects us, availability of culpable land, before we start paying attention to like how maybe interest from developed countries might come and everything. And the reality is that I'll be less concerned about interest from developed countries because we have like more arable or croppable land. Because like I said, climate change is already changing the dynamics. Second thing is that developed countries, they've figured out many other ways of doing farming. There are things now that we call vertical farming. There are hydroponic farms. There was a video I was watching recently of like a basement in New York where they do vegetable farming in the city of New York, in the heart of New York, where they do vegetable farming, right? So there are modern technologies. There are like ovens that can use to grow vegetables now.
Yeah.
There are modern technologies that, they really don't need more and more land because the resource is constrained. And that's the truth globally. But they figured out how to farm vertically rather than horizontally. They figured out other forms of farming. And more importantly, they've also figured out seed development and seed technology that can improve. So instead of planting 20 acres to get, in let's say 40 tons of or 50 tons of rice, they can plant 10 acres to get the same 50 tons of rice because the quality of the seed that they use, is much more better, right? And they don't need all that land anymore. So I'll be less worried about their interest in Africa from that point. I think for them, Africa is more of a consumption market because everything we import, we're a net importer of food. We import wheat, we import maize, we import fish, we import everything. They in many value chains, they've been able to produce at a better competitive advantage than we can, right? So, but where the pressure is more internal, to pay attention to the issues that are affecting availability of croppable land, the impact is having on food security, and developing policy-based solutions that are implementable, that are executable, and of course, executing them.
All right. Thank you. I mean, you did a lot of justice to that. So what are the unique peculiarities of agricultural value chains that aspiring entrepreneurs should know?
I think the first thing is that and I'm going to say this with some cynicism and skepticism.
Okay.
If you really want to do agribusiness, you really need to ask yourself first
Okay.
whether you want to do agribusiness and why. Agribusiness is not an easy sector. It's not a sector to quickly make money. I mean, most of the people that I've seen in this sector have done well. They are passion driven. They are purpose driven. They are like on a mission. It's not. I mean, I know government always says, "Oh, youth, you don't find or go to agriculture, blah blah blah." I mean, I would say there are other things youth can do apart from agriculture, because you really need to figure out whether you have the passion first.
Exactly.
How many things people can do? They can go and do coding. They can go and do tech, right? They can go and learn it. They can go to creative industry, right? They can go to creative industry. So these are all other industries that are booming, right? There's tech, there's creative industries that can provide employment for the youth. So not just agriculture. But I would say that agriculture still needs to be done by people. So the first thing is to figure out why. You need to figure out your why. After figuring out your why, the second thing is that agriculture is as much as a science as it can be a business. All the value chains are so different. Cassava is different from maize, is different from rice. It is so important for you to go and get knowledge about what aspect of agribusiness you want to focus on. The nuances, the integrations. You probably will need to spend a lot of time reading, interacting with entrepreneurs, established entrepreneurs in that sector, because there's also market knowledge, sector knowledge that you would only get, interacting with people that are already in that sector. But there's also knowledge of the value chain itself. Cashew is different from oil palm. It's different from cocoa. They are all different peculiarities, everything. So agric is that sector where whatever you do is different from the other. It's almost like you build specialization by value chain. So you first need to know it. I used to joke and tell people that if you're doing poultry, broilers is different from layers, it's different from breeding, it's different. You just need to, you just really need to understand. Because in agric, what makes the difference can be your knowledge of something that can look like a small knowledge of something. It can wipe off your entire investment because you do not know. That's the second thing. And the second thing is that you need to figure out how to do it, where in the value chain you want to stay, that will be as asset light as possible. Like I said, primary agriculture is not very attractive. So you need to figure out how you can collaborate if you need primary agriculture to be part of what you do. Because at the end of the day, there's something we call return on effort. God will not let us work in vain, right? So you need to figure out the part of the value chain that is most scalable, most attractive, and how you then collaborate for the areas where you may need, right? Maybe for your supply chain, for whatever you may need, but you don't necessarily need to be there. The last thing is that you need to respect capital. I need to say this the way I say. You need to understand that capital is scarce. Like there's a finite amount of capital at every single time in the world. So entrepreneurs need to be judicious in the way they deploy capital. So if you have a couple of projects to do, that's why I said figure out where is asset light and start from there. If you have to figure out what you need to do, start from the one that can quickly generate you cash, the one that can quickly generate you revenue, that can quickly generate you cash flow, so that you start having something to plug back into the business. Investors like that. It shows that you're disciplined. You're thinking about financial sustainability of the business. Not that you raise all the money and then use it to build fancy assets that will not generate anything, and then you need more money, right? And that discipline, this applies across every sector. But I think in agriculture is more important. In agribusiness is more important because it's almost like scale of preference. There are so many nice things you can do in any particular value chain. But the question is, are they the most critical things or the most important thing that will quickly help you generate revenue and cash flow? And so every aspiring entrepreneur must figure that out. And the last thing I'm going to say is that I think I said it at the beginning when I was saying, learn about the value chain. Find people, the journey can be very stressful and lonely. Find people who have done it, who know how things are going, be a part of a network, be a part of a network. Sometimes you're as rich as your network.
Exactly.
So be a part of a network that you can tap for knowledge, tap for financing, tap for encouragement, even support, and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Great. Okay. So lastly, where are the growth opportunities in the food and agribusiness sector?
I think we're seeing sort of like a shift that is going to generate fundamentally generate growth opportunities in animal protein.
Okay.
That's a sector where, to a large extent, is being import driven. So the biggest volume of consumed fish and meat and chicken in Nigeria used to be imported. But there's been a dynamic of foreign exchange movements now that has made locally produced chicken, for example, more attractive, relatively cheaper than even small good imported chicken. So we're seeing that dynamics. Beef has always been expensive anyways. So we're seeing that dynamics. And that's despite rising input costs. So I'm talking from a consumption point of view right now, right? And you compare it to what is out, the substitutes, which are all like all these imported products, which are less healthier and more expensive now. So I see a lot of opportunity in that space. And the other space I'm also going to mention is there's still opportunity in packaged foods, processing. I've come across a number of companies doing 1 billion, 2 billion naira revenue. They are, like I said, they're not in big fancy stores. They're not in ShopRite or Presebano, but they have good products, either corn-based, maize-based products, sold at a good price point in like remote areas, places where we call not interlands, for example.
Yeah, hinterland, yeah.
But very good mass market appeal. I think that is there. And I think that shift is giving a lot of multinationals a run for their money because of inflation and pressure on disposable income. A lot more people are looking for products that can be delivered at a good product, delivered at a cheaper price point. The good thing is that SMEs have the opportunity to deliver that because they don't have the sort of overheads, manpower overheads, marketing, adverts, branding that multinationals have, right? So we're sort of seeing that trend also. Interesting businesses doing a couple billions, opportunity, just screaming out in different markets. Last thing I'm going to say is that Nigeria is a big market. The kind of products, and I've been to open markets in the north, Kano, in the south, the kind of products you see in Kano are not the types you see in Anambra. I've been to Anambra, Oka. They're not the types you see in terms of this sort of mass market products I'm talking about. They're not the types you see in Lagos. In Lagos, the type you see in VI Ikoyi is not the type you see in Mowe or Yanokpaja, for example. And you'll be shocked that there's markets in every of those places. Take Yanokpaja, Bulegbada area. The captive market there is huge. Lagos is a huge state. Like you go to Kano, the same. So there's opportunity. People just need to figure out where they want to play how, right? And the shift that we're seeing is throwing opportunity for like SMEs that can figure out how to, weather the storm and what their right product distribution strategy will be.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you very much. I mean, this couldn't have come at a better time, considering the fact that, considering what's happening with Forex and also the need and drive for people to go into entrepreneurship because of low employment rate, right? So, I just want to thank you very much for taking out of your time to share with us, from your valuable wealth of experience and knowledge. So thank you very much once again for coming on the Agribusiness Chat with Jinmi Ajayi.
Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, thank you very much.